Welcome guys to Let's Build a Castle Part 9. We are making incredible progress with this series now, and this episode is no different. As you can see, we complete this huge architecture in front of us, which consists of the king's quarters, or the bedrooms and stairwells, and we're going to finish that huge architecture today. As you can see, it's seamlessly integrated with the rest of the castle, including the huge towers and everything else we have built. So let's begin. As we open here, coming up from what we built last episode, you can see what we had left here. We built that small corridor leading onto it, and now there is much more to do. So, in the same way I do every other episode, I feel it's very important to get rid of all the simple stuff, everything that shouldn't take a lot of time. So, as you can see there, I just quickly did the roof. I may have skipped more of the roof than normal, purely because I've built that same style of roof now in possibly 3 episodes. So, if you do need to see that, just head back to one of the previous episodes in which I build maybe the corridor, and then you'll see how it's done. But it's a very simple process. I'm sure you could just got it from that. So now what we need is a bit more defense. So I try and integrate that in. So as you can see, those little platforms there I created are actually just extra bits of defense where people could be stood looking over the castle and checking for any signs of danger, especially because this is the king's quarters. So sorry for that weird cut then, but yeah. So this is going to be, now we're building up the king's quarters on the very top floor, which is also why it's very important that I built in those extra bits of defense. So now we're just building up the windows in a very similar style to whenever else I've created the windows. So in the same way, we're using the light greys as highlights and building it off like a dark grey like palette, and then just building up and changing the style to make sure it works, and slowly integrating the depth and the little extra details of this whole window, and I feel that works very nicely. Now we add some little struts, and just seeing those little platforms there I was talking about, you might wonder how the soldiers would ever get to those, and actually we're going to build that in a later episode. There is more architecture to be put on the roof of this building, so that'll be in the next episode or so. So now I've just copied and pasted that all the way down on the sides in similar styles, and don't put a smaller one there on the side, so that's why I skipped that, just because it's the same style but it's just on a smaller scale. So now this is kind of like a decorative thing in Edwardian houses, things like that. Well, things especially in Britain, the houses which are more expensive you may have either like a flat wall with your windows in it, but what makes a house more expensive is if the windows extrude from the wall, and which is kind of the kind of concept I went for here. So because this is the Grand King's quarters, I feel instead of just having a simple thing, this boxed area just sticks out and just adds that extra bit of a grand nature. In a later episode, when we do the interior design of the king's quarters, the box bit that sticks out that we're building now will actually consist of his large writing desk, which lies within his room. So now we're working on the base of this whole thing. You can see we built in a nice balcony to it there on the lower floor. So that actual boxy area I've just built there that protrudes out, the top half of it is the king's quarters, and the lower half, which I didn't put windows in, leads on to the rest of the bedrooms. So now we're doing the lower half here, the very bottom half actually beneath it, which just leads on to other parts of the castle. Like through there you see those doors lead on to the Great Hall and other places like that. So now I'm just building up this design and trying to integrate it, because it's a bit of a weird, scaling. It's only 3 wide, and normally I'm used quite even numbers within this build, and because it's only 3 wide, it's become a little bit of a problem, it's just to make it look good. So as you can see, the double doors I don't feel were working, so I removed those slabs and just reiterate this design, just use a very similar process of just kind of putting in an idea, removing it if it doesn't work, and replacing it with a new idea until I feel I got a wall with a door that works. And just I feel the single door works fine because it's identical on the other side. So now there are 2 routes in, which I mean are kind of, overcomes the fact that there's only 1 single doors on them. So now we're just adding a little fence there, and I feel this side is starting to look incredibly good. But now we have this bit that protrudes out, so I redesigned that template just to make it that solid slab you expect, for me to build upon. And this is actually, this bit that sticks out on the very top floor here is also, as you can see, connected to the king's quarters area, and that is actually going to be where his bed lies, in this stuck out area. So I feel this had to be especially grand. So I decided big windows. These 3 wide windows are the biggest in the whole castle. Actually, I've not built any this big so far. So I added that extra bit of grand nature. And I just see just building up with the exact same materials just to create quite a grand area for the king to look out upon as he spends his nights in those rooms. So now we're working on the very top, adding in, you know, making sure it comes to a very sharp medieval point and ensuring it looks incredibly good. So just building up those extra details again with the extra bits of material. As you can see, this is again another, you know, style I've used throughout this castle, and I feel it works incredibly well here. So I just add an extra bit of detail, a bit of highlight with wood, and then copy and paste it all the way down. I think it works very well. Now here we are now beneath the ground floor, so obviously with that low down that there wouldn't need any windows, because on the other side of this there aren't any rooms, there aren't any corridors. This is basically support for the whole castle. So I start working in a design here that kind of integrates the whole structure onto the landscape itself. So as you can see, using these nice designs, I feel it works incredibly well, and just merging the floors. So now we build up those windows, just copy those windows again, but on a, you know, they're not as wide here obviously, and further again extend that structural integrity type thing I explained, and just, you know, making sure that it looks like it just merges into the ground quite nicely. I feel that works incredibly well. Now I've repeated it all the way along, and the fact that just all this repetition throughout this, the fact I feel it works really incredibly well. Like when we saw that little wide shot then, I feel it just expresses that grand nature of this whole build. Is all the details just replicated, and all that symmetry I've made sure I've gone to. So I feel this build is slowly coming along. So now we're just adding in the last few details, you know, just kind of scrubbing off and refining the sharp edges we've got lying around, and we just want to make sure it looks nice and smooth and works incredibly well. So this is the final bit, the king's quarters here. That's these final windows being added in. And actually, this brings us to the end of the episode. I'm going to use the end here as an opportunity to explain the layout. So from this angle here, what you can see is this top floor there is the king's quarters. And then as we lower down, that smaller window there is actually the other bedrooms, and the final level beneath that, another tall window, is in fact the areas that lead onto the king's quarters, and perhaps a stairwell that leads into the lower halls of the castle. So I hope that was sufficient in explaining this whole architecture to you guys, and that actually brings us to the end of the episode. I feel we've moved through a lot in this episode, and I hope it wasn't too quick. I like to get through these episodes as nicely and as pacey as possible, and I feel this castle is coming towards its final stages. In the meantime, between the next episode, I'm actually going to re-template the new areas, because there are some more areas such as the barracks, the stables, a huge watchtower, those kind of things that need to be implemented. So that template there is going to be the base of the watchtower, and the rest of it is actually going to be built off camera, the rest of the template. So guys, I will see you in the next episode, in which we're either going to work on that watchtower I mentioned then, or the interior of this build. So guys, thanks for watching, and goodbye!